Welcome to the MrpTech podcast. This is episode 28. My name is Matt, and this is a weekly podcast where I review multiple platforms and technologies to see which works best for me in order to help you. In today's episode, I have a lot to talk about, and one of the first things that I want to acknowledge is the fact that I mentioned last week that September would be a big month for MrpTech, and in this case, it really is. I'd like to announce that for the first time, we've reached 1,000 downloads for the month of September. I think that's a really big milestone. I understand there's a lot that goes into it as far as download are concerned, but it's a big moment. And thank you all for listening, and thank you all for keeping up with this podcast as I continue to grow. As I keep going on with these thank yous, I have a couple other thank yous that I'd like to acknowledge. Two really quick thank yous and one that I might spend a couple minutes on. First of all, I want to give a special thanks to Tom Lawrence from Sunday Morning Linux Review and Joe Resington from Linux Luddites, as they have given me some positive feedback for my podcast. Thanks, guys, for the email. I really appreciate all the feedback that you gave me, and I hope that somebody here listening goes and checks out your shows, because they're good shows. Next up, I want to spend a little bit longer on one last thank you. And last week, I had sent some emails out to other podcasters to try to get some basic feedback on my show and how to improve the quality week after week. And basically, I was just looking for someone to respond to my emails and say, what could I do better? What are the things I'm doing wrong? What are the things I'm doing right? And one person that I sort of had in the back of my mind, although I didn't want to email right away, was Steve McLaughlin, who is the door-to-door geek who owns podnuts.com. Many of you may know him. And I basically just sent him an email saying, can you take a look at a couple of these episodes of my podcast and just give me some basic feedback? And well, what he did is he went and he downloaded every single episode that I put out so far, and he listened to them all within about 24 hours. First, he responded with one email, and then that first email became many emails with countless topics of feedback on how I can improve my show, how I can improve how I present things to my listeners, my website, and all sorts of really great ideas that he had. He really went above and beyond what I had originally asked him to. So thanks again to Steve McLaughlin, and check out his website. It's podnuts.com, www.podnutz.com. It's a great website for anybody who's interested in podcasting, and it suggests that you all take a listen to some of his shows. And if you're interested in podcasts, he's got a podcast for just about everything on his site. Some of them that I've listened to in the past, Linux for the Rest of Us is a great show. Android App Addicts, if you're interested in Android. If you like audiobooks, there is Book Nuts. That's a great podcast. I just started listening to myself. I didn't even know about that show. I listen to audiobooks quite frequently. If you're into computer repair or things like Raspberry Pi, they have episodes of the Computer Repair Podcast or the Mini PC Show, another computer repair show called My Hard Drive Died, and the list just goes on. There's quite a few shows. They do certain shows, do live shows, if you're interested in watching some live content as well. It's a great website if you want to get into podcasting. The Door-to-Door Geek really is podcaster is well known for his high quality content, and I encourage you to check out his website because he knows what he's doing, and all of the hosts on that website are really great, down to earth people who are really passionate about what they like to talk about as far as technology is concerned. So thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it, and I couldn't have asked for anything else. You've answered all of my questions, and really I was just looking for a little bit of feedback, and that little bit of feedback went a long way, and hopefully you as a listener will start to see some of those things that I'm going to implement over the next few weeks. So with that said, I'm going to get into the episode today. I've got quite a bit of things I'd like to talk about, actually. I'm going to mix it up a little bit. This show, I'm going to revisit some things that I've talked about in the past, and then I have a new topic I'm going to discuss just towards the end. And in today's episode, I'm going to pick 3 things that I have talked about in previous episodes. Just want to give you an update on some things that I've been working on. A while back, I did a podcast on the Solus project, and I talked about how I took Solus and I installed it on my Acer Chromebook. During that review, I made a YouTube video during that review, and during the podcast afterwards, I talked about the things that I liked about it, the things I didn't like about it. And there was a few features that I really liked and a few features that I thought needed improving. In that time since I made this podcast, an update to Solus has come about and has improved some of the things that I mentioned in the last podcast. So with Solus 1.2.0.5 has come out, has been released, along with the latest Budgie desktop. And with that, there was quite a few things that I really noticed right away as far as improvement. And if you remember my video before mentioning how when I would use the Raven panel and I wanted to try to power off my computer, I'd have to move all the way down from top to bottom in order to hit the power button the way that I liked to use the menu. I wanted the menu down at the bottom of the screen instead of the top of the screen. And they've made a few minor changes to the user interface that I really like. And now that problem has been alleviated, now when you hit the power, the button on the panel, it's easier to turn off your computer no matter where that panel is. Just a neat little update, that I'm sure, as I mentioned earlier, was in the works for Solus and for Budgie desktop. And it still continues to work just great to this day. I've done several updates since the podcast episode where I talked about Solus OS. It's working great, no problems whatsoever, and just minor improvements have been made, and I sort of appreciate that. On to the next topic, I wanted to just give you an update on Arch Linux. And the last time that I reviewed Arch Linux, I again made a YouTube video on my YouTube channel. And I showed my listeners what Arch Linux was, why I used it, why I liked Arch Linux, and sort of tried to alleviate the stereotype that happens when a lot of people think of Arch Linux being hard to use and difficult to maintain. And I made this silly comment to my listeners that I've had 0 problems with Arch Linux for over a year, and as I said that during the recording, I had a feeling that was going to come and bite me. And sure enough, right after I recorded that episode, I ran into a few problems with Arch Linux that I had never seen before. One was a network connectivity problem. For some reason, my wireless was not working. And I was able to get around that problem. I went onto the Arch forums and we managed to figure out exactly what was causing the problem. And I had to rename one of my networks, and I was able to get back up and running with that. And as soon as that happened, I also realized that my access to the Arch user repository had stopped working, and Yaourt wasn't working correctly. And what that is it's a piece of software that helps you download from and install from the Arch user repository. Basically, I couldn't connect to the Arch user repository for any reason. Yaourt just stopped working. So I had to completely uninstall Yaourt and reinstall it, and I was back up and working again in no time. The only other issue that I have with Arch Linux right now is I'm on a System 76 computer, and for some reason the System 76 driver has stopped working, and I'm not really sure why that is, and I think it just needs updating, and as soon as that gets updated, I'll be back up and running again. So that's it for my update with Arch Linux. Still, the OS itself is running solid. I really have had no problems with it. These are just minor issues. And just like Solus, Arch Linux, just keeps getting better and better. And it really is a great machine that I've had running for, well over a year now with really no issues whatsoever. The third thing that I want to sort of review and revisit is another topic that I mentioned a while back about the Ardour audio workstation. During that podcast, I mentioned that I was going to start using Ardour for all of my videos and this podcast, which I have been doing. And I've really noticed a difference in the quality of my recordings, and that has to do with a few different things as far as the tweaks I'm making week after week to the tracks itself. And Ardour is something that really is powerful and strong. On a couple of occasions, I've had a couple of weird crashes, but never as I'm recording anything. Hopefully, I'm going to knock on wood right now that I don't run into that problem. Just a couple of strange crashes after I exported audio or when I'm loading up Ardour itself. But overall, it's been pretty stable for the most part. And I have been using Ardour for all of my podcasts and my videos, along with Audacity. And I mentioned wanting to switch it over to a production environment. And my production environment, if you don't know, is besides doing these podcasts, is I'm running a live music environment. I have a band that I play in, and I use a PreSonus Studio Live mixer, and I record my concerts that I play. But I also use an iPad and an iPhone to control the mixer wirelessly and to monitor levels and to control the level of not only the output of the sound, but also stage monitors, floor monitors, and just having the wireless capability is something that is really important. And I would love to be able to use Ardour with something like an iPad or an iPhone. And I'm not sure if that's possible. I've looked into it a little bit, but as of right now, there's no way for me to switch over completely to a production environment that I need to use something like an iPad, iPhone, or my MacBook that I use. And why would I use something that's closed when I'm such an open source advocate? Well, in this case, when you're a musician, right now the best option for musicians, the best ease and the highest quality that you can get is by using things like Mac and iPad and iPhone. And if there was an open source equivalent that was as good and as easy to use, I would be happy to do that. Ardour is almost there. I just don't see the apps available to be able to run on an iPad connecting to my PreSonus mixer. I'm sure there are other workarounds, but for right now, that's not really something that's possible. I've already, invested in this hardware, and it works in one way that I need it to. And I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to keep working on this. And if there's a way that I can switch, eventually I will. And I'm just happy that I can advocate for open source software when I can and use it whenever I can, understanding that it's not for every single environment. So I'm going to continue to use Ardour. I'm going to continue learning the ins and outs of the software. And who knows, maybe in the next several months, I'll figure out a way to give it a shot and figure something out that I can work with. Okay, so next up on my list, those are things that I just wanted to revisit as briefly as I could. And I also wanted to hit a new topic this week. That's macOS Seirra, which was just released last week. And normally, I'm not one to jump on upgrading to the latest and greatest, and I've said that several times in episode after episode. But macOS Seirra has some compelling features that I'm sort of interested in. And one of those is the ability to use Siri on a MacBook Pro. I don't use Siri for a lot of things, but there have been times where I've wanted Siri on my laptop. Why would I want Siri on my laptop? Well, there's a lot of times that I'm using voice search on Google or that type of thing, and that's great for Google. But being able to open apps with my voice and things like that is something that's handy from time to time if I'm trying to multitask and I really want to get things open quickly. I think having Siri on a laptop is a good idea. One of the other things that I'm really interested in is being able to copy from one device to another, whether it's my iPhone or my iPad, and I want to copy over to my laptop or my phone or vice versa to my iPad. Just having that ability to use those functions, I think, is really important, especially for the things that I do. I'm constantly looking at articles on my phone, wishing I had it on my laptop, opening links in emails, and trying to work back and forth between mobile and desktop or my laptop all together. And this is just a way to get everything to work together to get the task done that I need to get done. There are a few other features that I'm not really interested in, such as using your Apple Watch to log into your computer. I don't have an Apple Watch, so that's not really a feature that I'm all interested in. But just accessing the files that I need to use, whether I'm on my phone or my iPad or my laptop through iCloud, is a feature that I think is something that I will need to occasionally use, but it's not something that I want to use with all of my files. In fact, there are certain files that I want to keep on my computer that I don't want in iCloud. So I think at some point over the next few weeks, there's some features on here that I want to try, and one of them being Apple Pay on Safari, the Safari web browser, that are compelling enough to make me want to upgrade. And as I mentioned earlier, the reason I don't tend to upgrade right away is because I like to keep this particular laptop working as stable as it could be. And right now it's working just fine. With all of my recording software that I use for music and production, all of the Persona software, I've read that it is and has been updated for macOS Seirra. I'm not convinced with some of the iPad apps or the iPhone apps if they are fully compatible with connecting to my computer with OS Seirra. That I'm going to have to research a little bit more, and I'm going to have to be convinced that I'm not going to run into any problems. So I'm going to do some more reading on macOS Seirra and see if it really is that compelling to upgrade. I may wait a few more weeks before I give a full review on this. But if you tried it, please let me know what you think of this latest operating system put out by Apple. I'd love to hear from anybody listening to this podcast and on any of the topics. So in the meantime, I have some other projects that are in the works over the next few weeks that we're going to discuss in greater detail today and in the future. And from time to time, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back and I'm going to review or revisit some things that I've talked about and just let you know how things are going, because as time moves on, so do projects and so do releases and so do everything else that I like to talk about. So a few things that I'm excited about with the recording of this podcast tomorrow, Elon Musk is going to talk about SpaceX's vision to colonize Mars. I think that's a huge topic, and I'd like to discuss that in the future, a future episode. We've talked a lot about SpaceX and those technologies. So there are lots of things that are on my radar right now, but that's good because there's lots of things to talk about. And with that said, the last thing that I want to talk about today is something that I have been reluctant to mention in all of the previous podcasts so far up to this point, and I've had available since episode 1, but didn't really feel right about advertising it a little bit. And that is, I have started a Patreon page. It's over at www.patreon.com/MrpTech. And this is a way for those of you who might like the content that I'm providing to support me in my future endeavors and to help me create more videos, create more podcasts, create new things week after week. And I just invite you to take a look at that. And if you're interested in helping me grow this podcast, to grow more listeners, and do more things, you can find all sorts of information over there, patreon.com/MrpTech. With that said, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.